The Police Executive Research Forum is run by an academician and former police officer named Chuck Wexler. He has published a report, and I recommend that you go to Nooganomics.com to click a link that will give you this 140-page book describing police reform happening in places such as Camden, New Jersey, another New England armpit, and the high-flying Seattle, Washington. David Tulis here with Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and FM 92.7. Police reform is something that the Ferguson riots put on the front burner, but not here in Chattanooga. Apparently not here, where there has been an air of lenity, and people who have traveled about and are telling me here there is a good deal of grace on the part of the police department for, let's say not against, but for the members of the public with whom the officers interact. There is less abusive policing here than in many other jurisdictions across the country. We read about those on the wires. You can see your Facebook feed for stories about police abuse, the raping of women, the shooting of people who are distraught. There's a terrifying story in the Boston Globe about a young man who is having an emotional episode after the breakup of his girlfriend. He had a pistol, and his father called the police. Big mistake, because what happened was that there was a mass event around that house in a small Massachusetts town. And when it was over, the young man was slain by officers who were all in combat gear. They had vacated houses all around this one house, and brought this young man's emotional crisis to a fatal end. Right, the denouement is death, and that's often what happens when police are called. We see it again and again. Police are called for a problem that the civilian thinks the police is fit to solve, and the family dog is shot down. An old woman is thrown out of her wheelchair, or other miscreancy done by very strong, courageous men who feel fear for their lives, and abuse the citizenry. Police reform seeks to change the dynamic, and I don't think that it really can, because fundamentally policing is part of the state. Right, policing is a state function. It arose. If you read Martin Van Crevel's The Rise and Decline of the State, it arose with the state itself. It is part and parcel of the war-making enterprise, which is the modern state. And the state is on mass decline, starting as he evaluates it in 1945. That's when the state began its decline, with the loss of reason in making war. War has become much more problematic to states than it used to be prior to nuclear power and nuclear weapons. But policing is being. You said, well, is there any good news about policing, David? You're kind of bleak on this topic, and you published today at Nooganomics.com a somewhat bleak analysis of the work to be done in Chattanooga. Well, I do. And by the way, you do need to go to Nooganomics.com to read the shorthand analysis of the problems of policing in Chattanooga and the unfinished business that very possibly Edwin McPherson will be working on if he is named chief of police by Mayor Berke. Mayor Berke is going to be announcing any day now his choice, and Edwin McPherson is one of three. He is the only black candidate. There are two others, David Roddy and Todd Chamberlain, of a very violent organization called LAPD. Todd Chamberlain is seeking the position out of Los Angeles. But Edwin McPherson is in consideration, and may be just the best pick for chief of police of Chattanooga. There are changes ahead, and we can see some of these changes that are market driven as opposed to state driven. The state and the policing function are centralizing and militarizing. Okay, that is a trend that I think is difficult to stop. Though Wexler's analysis understands that dynamic and is trying to nip it in the bud. And it's through the use of 4 reforms. There are 4 main points of police reform that David Tulis, your host here at Nooga Radio, have been discussing for a long time. And these are points that you can read for yourself. And I suggest you do that. I suggest you download this report if you really want to know what's wrong with policing and how it can be improved. How it can be improved. Go to Nooganomics.com and click the link in today's post. That is the post by the blogger with the biggest pen, and that's me, David Tulis. I do thank you for giving me just a minute of your time. The 4 reforms are as follows: the proper and use of time, space, cover, and de-escalation. Those are the 4 reforms where the officer doesn't have to kill someone because he needs to get back. He needs to get back on the beat. Right? You kill the guy because you don't have time to deal with him, and you've got your patrol to run. So, well, there's another civilian shot down. He was asking for it, and so he's dead. That doesn't have to happen if you use time properly, and realize that some instances will take half the day. Right? Some encounters may last the whole day. And no, you're not going to be able to write tickets on that day if you're dealing with a person with a psychotic episode, barred in a house, and he has an SKS. Okay, you don't have to write tickets today, but you're going to figure out how to disarm the situation without a show of force and without the certainty of the man being slain, because that's what's always certain. The Chris Sexton killing, that was certain. It was going to happen that way, and there was fear somehow that this distraught man was going to outrun the radio waves if he was able to escape any further, which he had led police on a 2-hour chase already, and he was shot down multiple times by sheriff's deputies in Saudi Daisy, and that is one more death of a man who didn't have to die, who had done nothing worthy of capital punishment, and yet he was given an extrajudicial capital punishment. Right? These are executions. They are executions, not judicially sanctioned, but sanctioned by the law and sanctioned by the totality of circumstances that Neil Pinkston evaluated, that Sheriff Jim Hammond evaluated, and together said is okay. This is legally sanctioned killing. It's sad, yes, but the man he did draw a weapon. And so we massed against him, had to fire just to protect our own lives. We had to protect our own lives. We could not have an innocent police officer be wounded or killed by him, and so we had to open fire. Those are circumstances which don't have to happen. They don't have to happen that way, right? That's a concentration that ends usually in violent acts. Reform says use space, use time, use cover to avoid having to kill somebody who has not done anything worthy of death. All right, that Chris Sexton had done nothing worthy of death. He did not deserve to be shot dead, but he was, and so we have to ask: is that right? Now, I know Americans are a violent and bloody people. We are a violent people, but we also are very compassionate people. We are great ones for charity, and so somehow, my goal here at the David Tulis Show is to expand the claims of charity upon you, the listeners, so that you won't be so quick to say, well, that he deserved it, right? We can't have officers being shot at. We can't have officers having guns aimed at them. We just can't have that. And so the man lost his life. My goal is to end the bloodshed by a local economy argument, which is what reform is. Reforms bring local economy into policing as opposed to a state economy, right? The state economy model that we have allows for these killings. The killing of Officer Stevenson, of Todd Browning, the plumber in East Ridge in August. That was a year ago now, and he was summarily executed at point blank range by a military rifle. At point blank range, the brass clattering against the glass windshield of the car, in which the camera showing the whole thing was mounted. We need to have the use of time, space, cover, and de-escalation techniques. These are the reforms that need to come. And we're not talking about them here because we have not had a high-profile killing, right? We had the Javerio Eagle killing, I think now about 2 years ago, which we covered at Nooganomics.com. and some others, but we haven't had ones that somehow catch the imagination of the public, right? We haven't had a walking while black man being shot down because he looked funny, right? Or he pulled out his phone and got shot down. We haven't had that here, and we may have to have that happen before there is a claim by reform on the public dialogue, and that's what I hope we have to can have that happen now, prior to someone being killed. What we want to have happen is for you, the listener, to care about these issues and to let your city council member know your views, right? Or let the mayor know your views. I think the new chief, maybe it's Chief McPherson. I think if Chief McPherson becomes the chief of police, he's going to have to work on the culture of policing. And we have Hanson Melvin to thank for bringing to light a remarkable bit of blue, the blue code of honor. Now, in his case, he was in May of 2016 arrested without probable cause, and he irritated David Campbell, the police officer who was fired for a false arrest. The arrest took place because Hanson would not give his social security number, and he refused to show a license that he didn't have. And David Campbell was harassing him about that, and said, this is something that Hanson Melvin forgot. It was not in his affidavit. David Campbell said, "You're on government property," and that's just a remarkable statement. You're on government property at Hickson Crossing apartment complex, right near our radio station here in Hickson. Well, some people may be on federal welfare at that place, but the people involved here are paying rent, right? They're rent-paying residents of Chattanooga, and he was told that you're on government property, and so was a neighbor in another building, Rochelle Gelpin. She was told, go into your house because it's government property. That's what the officer said. The context being that evening, an uproar that had occurred elsewhere in the complex, and officers were swarming about, right, in like locusts, if you will, across the parking lot. And Rochelle Gelpin was told, this is government property, go into your house. And when she gave signs of resenting that or resisting that, she was summarily arrested. And she did the right thing. She did what Hanson Melvin did, was to brave the officer repeating his claims against her before the grand jury. Now, Hanson Melvin was indicted. Rochelle Gelpin was given a no true bill, so her case just went away. She followed his example, by the way. She took inspiration from Hanson Melvin. I'd say Hanson Melvin is an inspiration to every citizen. Every citizen should think about doing what Hanson Melvin did. If we all did, policing as we know it today would end. It would simply end because the cost of prosecution for these cases, all of which go into plea bargaining, would be astronomical. It would be astronomical to prosecute every case if every person said, well, indict me, right? Because we have complicity of the victims, the citizens, with this policing system. We have complicity, and we have the state to help them out through the PD's office, the public defender's office. We have a mill, a plea bargain mill, that allows for an extraordinary level of law enforcing activity against people who I would say probably mostly are innocent of any sins, and probably mostly innocent of any crimes. And that's what happened in the Gelpin and Hanson Melvin case, which we had here at Nooganomics.com and at Nooga Radio, the media platform that cares about the common man. So what happened was, now let me just get to this. This is part of the culture of policing in Chattanooga. This is a grievous problem. Okay, this suggests a cancerous way of thinking that Chief McPherson is going to have to deal with somehow, probably by firing people. And that's this. As Hanson Melvin's lawsuit points out, he had been arrested falsely late at night. He was taken to jail without probable cause. The police, David Campbell, lied about him in the report. And then David Campbell later lied about him before the grand jury. That's felony perjury, to lie before any lies given before a grand jury is felony perjury, right? It's perjury, it's misdemeanor perjury to lie on a form, and felony to lie in testimony. So anyway, that's what happened against Hanson Melvin. He was lied about twice and then indicted. But the next morning, Hanson was had been taken home by a friend, Collier Holmes, and they had just arrived from the county jail downtown, and guess what? They were suddenly surrounded by several police cars, and up to 8 officers are swarming these two men. Both of them are black, okay? And David Campbell, just by the way, is white. The fact that he's white and Hanson Melvin's black is kind of beside the point, but that does suggest something of an alternate dynamic here. But the officers arrested these men again. They were not free to leave. They were forced out of their car. They were searched. They were questioned in a very vague and unusual way. And you can read about some of these questions at Nooganomics.com. A remarkable accounting of what happened. And Hanson thinks that they were trying to feel him out. They were trying to feel out whether he was going to be belligerent. And of course, Hanson was belligerent. He went to Internal Affairs, and now he has filed suit. He was, in fact, belligerent against them, and they are going to be found out. They're going to be found out in the investigative process by the city's best attorney at McCune Law, and that's Clay Whitaker. Clay Whitaker is at McCune, Williams, Ashley, and Stanley law firm. And Clay is going to find out who these other officers were. They made a private arrangement to descend on this defendant who is charged with this disorderly conduct and intimidate him. And they restrained him and held him and wouldn't let them leave for several minutes. They were searched and patted down. Again, these were men who had done nothing wrong. They had done nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. They were just sitting in their car. They had done nothing wrong. No one had named them. No one had accused them. And these officers, by a private arrangement, descended on behalf of David Campbell. And that is a culture of intimidation and fear. That's police culture in Chattanooga. And that's something that Chief McPherson is going to have to work on. When Chief McPherson is named the police chief, he's going to have to work on that. That is simply wrong. It's also a crime. These are crimes. You read that lawsuit by Clay Whitaker, and it is an allegation of multiple crimes by these officers. Not just torts, right? These are not just wrongs and torts. They are crimes. These are crimes by the police, including oppression, which is a criminal offense to be involved in oppression. And so we have this as the background in which Edwin McPherson has a good chance of being named police. He has at least a 1 in 3 chance, right? Maybe better. He's well spoken of among 2 or 3 people whom I've asked about this question, and it seems to me that in the overall picture, based on reporting, that McPherson would be the better one because he is sympathetic to the black man, right? And I think that's important. Blacks are oppressed by policing; they are simply oppressed, and I think David Roddy would not do anything to stop that. David Roddy is in the direction of militarization, in the direction of surveillance, in the direction of the progressive state, right? The progressive surveillance and enforcement state. And I think McPherson, though by training and perhaps by disposition, is also in that direction. He does have the sympathy of his own people. And I think that's very important because blacks are perhaps the chief fuel in the judicial industrial complex in Hamilton County. They are the fuel that makes the machine run. They are the necessary oil to keep all the wheels turning, to keep the cells full, and they are abusively treated by policing. That is the report that I have, and we have the Gilpin case, we have the Hanson Melvin case to suggest that. So that's another area of reform. So demilitarization is one. The use of the 4 points of reform is another, and I think that there has to be some fundamental question of authority, and the authority particularly to use unmarked and disguised police vehicles for traffic enforcement. Traffic enforcement is where most people have encounters with the police, and to be stopped by a private car, a police car disguised as a private car, is entrapment. It's also being I would say, harassed without notice. You were not given notice that the police are there because you can't see that he's a police officer, right? He does not have blue lights rack on his car on the roof. It's not there. There are no markings in the car. So you don't have notice that a car that is a police car is behind you, and then you are brought to the side of the road for an interrogation. And in that interrogation, there's that other problem, is that there's a presumption that you're guilty, and the police are so used to not being questioned about their authority that they assume everybody must give in, and that no one has any procedural due process rights. And you have procedural due process rights. at a police stop. If you're stopped, you're under arrest. If you are under arrest, the officer under Chief McPherson has to be told to read you your rights. You have to be read your rights at that point if it's a legitimate stop. If it's not a legitimate stop, the officer cannot stop you. If you're free to go, when you ask that question, he should never stop you in the first place. That's what has to happen. No stops unless there's probable cause or a warrant for that traveler's arrest on the side of the highway. This is David Tulis, and we have Essential Health next with Loretta Lynn. Loretta Lynn, Essential Health in the next couple minutes. But first, I have got some very important messages for you. David Tulis.
Nooga Radio, AM 1240, 92.7 FM.